History is not just the story of events, it is the living pulse of nations, echoing through the streets, the policies, the art, and the everyday lives of people. Imagine a world on the edge of transformation, where centuries-old traditions confront the unstoppable tide of modernization, and a society wrestles with the dilemma of preserving its identity while stepping boldly into an uncertain future. This was Japan in the mid-19th century, a land isolated by policy, yet teetering on the brink of dramatic change. The Meiji Restoration was not simply a political shift, it was the awakening of a nation that would leap from feudal isolation to becoming a world power, all within a generation. Hello, and welcome to The Other Side Stories. Here, we travel beyond the usual headlines to explore the untold tales of world history, mysteries, turning points, and hidden connections that shaped our planet. If you love discovering how the past still echoes in our present, you're in the right place. Let's uncover the other side of history together. In the early 1800s, Japan had lived under the Tokugawa shogunate for more than 2.5 centuries. The shoguns ruled with an iron grip, enforcing a rigid social order known as the feudal hierarchy, isolating the country from the outside world, and restricting trade to select ports and controlled interactions, mainly with the Dutch and Chinese. For over 200 years, the Sakoko policy, literally closed country, ensured that foreign influence was minimal, and Japanese society thrived on a unique cultural, economic, and political rhythm that had evolved in relative stability. But stability, as history repeatedly teaches us, can be deceptive. Beneath the surface, the pressures of a growing population, economic constraints, and internal dissatisfaction began to simmer, creating a tension that would soon erupt with unprecedented force. The arrival of Commodore Matthew Perry and his Black Ships in 1853 is often cited as the catalyst for Japan's transformation. Imagine the scene: massive, steam-powered American warships appearing suddenly in Edo Bay, their black hulls cutting through the mist, their cannons a silent threat, and their presence an unspoken demand. Open your ports, open your doors, and engage with the outside world, or face the consequences. The shogunate was thrown into crisis. Japan had never faced such a direct confrontation with Western military might, and the nation, for centuries insulated from such pressures, found itself in a precarious position. The Treaty of Kanagawa, signed in 1854, forced Japan to open ports to American trade, marking the beginning of the end for its centuries of isolation. But the story was more than a clash of ships and diplomacy. It was a profound challenge to the legitimacy of the Tokugawa shogunate itself. Domains across Japan, known as Han, were governed by powerful daimyo, local lords, who began to question the authority of a shogunate that seemed incapable of protecting the nation from foreign intrusion. The seeds of unrest were sown not only by external threats, but by internal debates about who truly represented the interests of Japan: the shogun, the emperor, or the people themselves. Among these debates arose a movement that would dramatically reshape the political landscape: the call to restore power to the emperor. The emperor, long a symbolic figure residing in Kyoto, had been largely ceremonial for centuries, while real power rested with the shogunate in Edo. But the notion of Sonno Joi, meaning revere the emperor, expel the barbarians, gained traction among intellectuals, samurai, and influential domains. These advocates argued that Japan's salvation lay in returning authority to the emperor, modernizing the military, and adopting necessary Western technologies and strategies to protect national sovereignty. This ideological current intertwined with practical concerns. If Japan could not adapt, it risked colonization or subjugation by the Western powers who were sweeping across Asia. The political maneuvering that followed was subtle and complex. The Choshu and Satsuma domains, historically rivals in southern Japan, found a common cause in opposition to the shogunate. Samurai from these domains were among the most educated and politically astute, and they understood that a unified front was essential to challenge centuries of Tokugawa dominance. Behind closed doors, they negotiated alliances, planned strategic movements, and cultivated intellectual networks, preparing for a confrontation that would decide the future of Japan. By 1867, the situation reached a critical point. Tokugawa Yoshinobu, the 15th and last shogun, attempted reforms and even sought to modernize the shogunate's military forces. Yet it was too little, too late. The push for imperial restoration had gained unstoppable momentum. In a historic decision, Yoshinobu formally resigned, ostensibly to prevent civil war, and returned governing authority to the emperor. This event, known as the Meiji Restoration, symbolically marked the end of shogunal rule and the reassertion of imperial power. But the restoration was not a single moment of political change. It was the beginning of a profound transformation that would ripple through every aspect of Japanese life. The Meiji government, determined to consolidate power and modernize rapidly, implemented sweeping reforms. They dismantled the feudal system, abolishing the domains and replacing them with prefectures governed by centrally appointed officials. This move not only centralized authority, but also created a uniform system of governance capable of executing national policies efficiently. Samurai, once the elite military class, were stripped of their hereditary privileges, and a new conscript army was established. The sword, which had symbolized samurai status for centuries, was now replaced by rifles, artillery, and disciplined Western-modeled regiments. Industrialization became a cornerstone of the Meiji vision. The government actively sponsored railroads, telegraph lines, and modern factories, often recruiting foreign experts to teach the latest techniques in engineering, medicine, and education. Japan's cities began to transform. Edo became Tokyo, a name reflecting the shift from a feudal seat of shogunal power to a modern imperial capital. Streets filled with trams, telegraph poles, and bustling markets. The Japanese economy, once primarily agricultural, was rapidly diversifying into industry and trade, linking the nation more tightly both internally and to the global economy. Education, too, became a national priority. The Meiji leaders believed that knowledge was a key instrument of national strength. Compulsory education laws were enacted, promoting literacy, science, and civic understanding. The curriculum was influenced by Western models, yet imbued with a distinct sense of Japanese identity, ensuring that while citizens learned modern skills, they remained rooted in cultural heritage. The focus on education nurtured a generation capable of leading Japan through the complexities of modernization, technological innovation, and international diplomacy. Culturally, Japan experienced a complex interplay of preservation and adaptation. While Western clothing, architecture, and customs began to appear in urban centers, there was a conscious effort to preserve traditional arts, literature, and religious practices. The government encouraged Shinto as a unifying spiritual framework, linking loyalty to the emperor with national identity. Meanwhile, Buddhism and other cultural traditions continued to flourish, adapted to fit the rapidly modernizing society. This delicate balance allowed Japan to embrace modernization without wholesale abandonment of its historical roots. The economy's restructuring was equally dramatic. Land taxation systems were overhauled to create a stable revenue stream for the central government. Entrepreneurs were encouraged, sometimes with direct government investment, to build industries producing textiles, shipbuilding, and machinery. These policies laid the foundation for Japan's remarkable economic expansion in the late 19th and early 20th century. From the rice fields to the factories, from the classrooms to the ports, the Meiji Restoration had set in motion a comprehensive transformation, touching every life in the nation. Foreign policy became a new arena for demonstrating Japan's resurgence. Observing the colonial expansions of Western powers in Asia, the Meiji leaders recognized the need for a strong, unified, and technologically advanced military. Modernized naval fleets were constructed, drawing inspiration from British shipbuilding, and military academies were established to educate a new generation of officers. By embracing selective westernization in technology, strategy, and governance, Japan positioned itself not as a passive observer, but as an assertive participant on the global stage. The social impact of these reforms was profound. Former samurai had to navigate a new identity in a society that no longer recognized their hereditary privileges. Farmers, merchants, and artisans faced changing markets, new regulations, and opportunities for social mobility previously unimaginable. Urbanization accelerated as people moved to cities seeking work in factories and offices. Social hierarchies, while still present, became increasingly fluid, allowing talent, innovation, and entrepreneurship to play a larger role in determining one's place in society. Japan was shedding the constraints of feudalism and embracing the potential of a meritocratic future. The Meiji Restoration, however, was not without its conflicts and challenges. Resistance persisted in regions loyal to the old shogunate, and sporadic uprisings required military suppression. The tension between tradition and innovation created societal friction, as communities struggled to reconcile centuries-old customs with the demands of a modern state. The transformation of Japan under the Meiji government was not merely confined to governance or technology. It extended into the very soul of Japanese society. Arts, literature, and culture underwent a remarkable evolution, reflecting both the embrace of modernity and a reverence for tradition. Writers and thinkers grappled with the question of identity. How could Japan assimilate Western ideas while preserving a uniquely Japanese sensibility? This tension gave rise to a vibrant intellectual and cultural landscape where novels, newspapers, theater, and visual arts became arenas for negotiating the meaning of nationhood. One striking example is the emergence of modern literature. Authors began to explore themes of individualism, social responsibility, and the challenges of modern life, often using Western literary techniques while incorporating Japanese values. The translation of Western works into Japanese became widespread, introducing new philosophies, political theories, and scientific knowledge. Simultaneously, traditional forms such as kabuki and no theater were preserved, sometimes infused with modern themes or staged with new technical innovations. Music, too, evolved. Western instruments and notation were studied and blended with native traditions, creating hybrid forms that symbolized Japan's openness to the world without losing its roots. Education played a central role in cultivating the human resources necessary for modernization. Beyond primary schooling, specialized institutions were established to train engineers, military officers, physicians, and diplomats. These institutions often invited foreign experts, known as Oyatai Gaikojin, to teach in Japan, ensuring that students learned the latest techniques and ideas. The government understood that technological prowess alone was insufficient. A knowledgeable citizen capable of innovation, critical thinking, and effective administration was essential. By systematically investing in education, Japan created a foundation for sustained growth and international competitiveness. The economic consequences of the Meiji Restoration were equally profound. The government pursued an active industrial policy, often creating model factories, encouraging private entrepreneurship, and providing capital and technical expertise. Shipyards, textile mills, and mining operations flourished. Urban centers expanded rapidly, transforming Japan's demographic landscape. Cities like Tokyo, Osaka, and Yokohama became hubs of commerce, industry, and cultural exchange. Rural populations were drawn into the industrial economy, experiencing both the opportunities and dislocations with rapid modernization. The shift from agrarian livelihoods to urban employment introduced new social dynamics, from labor organization to the negotiation of new social identities. Infrastructure development under the Meiji era cannot be overstated. Railways connected distant regions, facilitating trade, communication, and mobility. Telegraph lines transmitted information rapidly, shrinking the perceived distance between cities and creating a more cohesive national consciousness. Ports were modernized to accommodate international trade, and navigation systems were upgraded to ensure safety and efficiency. These tangible developments signaled to the world that Japan was no longer an isolated nation, but a dynamic, engaged participant in global affairs. Military reform was another pillar of the Meiji agenda. The samurai class, long the backbone of Japan's feudal military structure, was gradually dissolved in favor of a conscript army. The government adopted Western-style organization, training, and weaponry, understanding that national survival in an era of imperialism required formidable armed forces. Japan's navy, modeled on the British Royal Navy, became a powerful deterrent against foreign threats. These reforms were not merely defensive. They enabled Japan to project power, assert sovereignty, and negotiate with foreign powers from a position of strength. Resistance to these sweeping changes persisted, highlighting the social and political tensions inherent in rapid transformation. Former samurai, dissatisfied with the loss of their status and stipends, sometimes led uprisings, notably the Satsuma Rebellion of 1877. Though ultimately suppressed, these conflicts underscored the challenges of reconciling tradition with modernization. The government's ability to quell resistance while continuing reforms demonstrated both political acumen and the effective integration of new military capabilities. The successful navigation of these tensions reinforced the legitimacy of the Meiji leadership and paved the way for continued transformation. Japan's foreign policy ambitions grew alongside domestic reforms. Recognizing the vulnerability of neighboring countries to Western colonization, the Meiji government adopted a proactive approach to regional diplomacy and defense. By modernizing its military and adopting selective Western practices, Japan positioned itself to assert influence in East Asia. The First Sino-Japanese War, 1894 to 1895, and the Russo-Japanese War, 1904 to 1905, later exemplified Japan's newfound ability to project power and challenge traditional hierarchies in the region. The Meiji Restoration had, in essence, prepared Japan not only for survival, but for leadership in a rapidly changing international landscape. The legal system was also overhauled, replacing feudal codes with modern laws inspired by Western models. Property rights, commercial regulations, and civil codes were established to create predictability, promote economic activity, and protect the rights of citizens. These legal reforms fostered domestic stability and facilitated foreign investment, further integrating Japan into the global economy. The shift from local, customary law to a unified national legal framework represented a radical departure from centuries of feudal governance, underscoring the comprehensive scope of the Meiji reforms. Cultural negotiation continued to define the Meiji era. While Japan eagerly adopted Western technology, clothing, and architecture, it simultaneously emphasized the importance of indigenous traditions and spiritual continuity. The government promoted Shinto as a national religion, linking reverence for the emperor with civic virtue. Festivals, ceremonies, and cultural practices were encouraged as a means of fostering national identity. At the same time, Buddhism and other traditional practices adapted to the new era, demonstrating resilience and flexibility. This balancing act, embracing the modern without abandoning the past, remains a hallmark of Meiji Japan. The impact of industrialization and modernization on daily life was immediate and profound. Rural communities faced new economic realities as agriculture became more commercialized and mechanized. Urban workers navigated crowded cities, factory labor, and changing social norms. Education transformed childhood, preparing the next generation for participation in a technologically sophisticated and globally connected society. The visual landscape of Japan changed dramatically. Brick buildings, iron bridges, and railway stations symbolized progress, while traditional wooden homes and temples persisted, creating a layered, dynamic environment. The Meiji Restoration also influenced intellectual thought and social philosophy. Western political theories, from constitutional governance to democratic ideas, entered Japanese discourse. Thinkers debated the appropriate balance between imperial authority and civic participation. Concepts of nationalism, modern citizenship, and the role of the individual in society gained traction. These intellectual currents provided ideological support for reforms and shaped the contours of Japan's evolving identity. In essence, the Meiji era was as much a battle of ideas as it was a program of tangible modernization. By the turn of the century, the results of Meiji policies were evident. Japan had transformed from a feudal, isolated state into a centralized, industrialized, and militarily capable nation. Its economy diversified, infrastructure connected distant regions, education nurtured skilled citizens, and the legal system provided stability for commerce and governance. Japan's cultural identity evolved, balancing the preservation of traditions with the adoption of global innovations. The nation's newfound strength enabled it to assert influence regionally, ultimately shaping the balance of power in East Asia. The legacy of the Meiji Restoration extends beyond the specific achievements of infrastructure, industry, or military strength. It exemplifies how a society can mobilize collective will, leadership, and intellect to navigate existential challenges. The lessons of the Meiji era highlight the importance of adaptability, strategic vision, and the delicate negotiation between heritage and innovation. Japan's transformation demonstrates that rapid modernization, when carefully managed and culturally sensitive, can produce remarkable outcomes without wholly erasing the past. Art and culture continued to flourish alongside modernization, reflecting both continuity and change. Ukiyo-e, the traditional woodblock printing, evolved to include modern subjects and Western techniques. Literature explored themes of individualism, social obligation, and the tensions between tradition and innovation. Theater experimented with blending Western dramaturgy and Japanese storytelling. These cultural adaptations served as both reflection and critique, offering a mirror to a society in flux. In these expressions, the Japanese people engaged with the profound questions posed by the Meiji Restoration. What does it mean to be Japanese in a rapidly modernizing world? How can tradition coexist with progress? Economically, Japan's transformation fueled urban growth and social mobility. Merchants and entrepreneurs emerged as key players in shaping industrial society. Education and literacy enabled a more informed citizenry, while new technologies created opportunities for innovation. Agricultural reform improved productivity, even as rural communities adjusted to the demands of a national economy. Together, these factors forged a society increasingly capable of sustaining modernization, maintaining sovereignty, and asserting influence on the world stage. The Meiji Restoration was not merely a historical event, it was a comprehensive, multidimensional transformation. Governance, military, economy, education, culture, and international relations were all reimagined. As the Meiji era progressed, Japan's modernization touched every aspect of daily life, redefining what it meant to be part of a rapidly transforming society. Urbanization accelerated as people migrated from rural areas to emerging industrial centers. Cities like Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya became bustling hubs of commerce, industry, and culture. Streets filled with the sounds of trams and the clatter of horse-drawn carts alongside the new mechanical hum of factories. Marketplaces were alive with activity, blending traditional goods with imported items, from European fabrics to technological innovations. Citizens found themselves navigating a world in which centuries-old customs coexisted with radical new technologies and ideas. One of the most striking changes of the Meiji period was the development of modern transportation and communication networks. Railways, introduced under government direction, connected distant regions with unprecedented efficiency. People could now travel for work, education, or leisure in a fraction of the time it had previously taken. Telegraph lines carried messages across prefectures, enabling rapid dissemination of information and tighter coordination of government policies. These infrastructural advancements not only facilitated economic growth, but also fostered a sense of national cohesion. Japan, once fragmented into autonomous feudal domains, now functioned as an integrated, interconnected state. Industrialization reshaped labor and the social structure. Factories and workshops demanded a disciplined, educated workforce, and the government implemented policies to train and regulate labor. Textile mills, shipyards, and steel factories proliferated, attracting young workers who were no longer bound by traditional agricultural or samurai obligations. This shift produced both opportunity and tension. Workers gained new prospects for social mobility, but also faced longer hours, mechanized labor, and the challenges of urban life. Labor unrest occasionally erupted, signaling the growing pains of a society in transition. The Meiji leadership, aware of these pressures, sought to balance economic modernization with social stability, often instituting regulations, schools, and civic organizations to foster compliance and productivity. The cultural landscape also underwent transformation. Western art, literature, and ideas flowed into Japan, inspiring creative experimentation. Japanese artists and writers were exposed to new techniques, genres, and themes, which they adapted to resonate with local audiences. Photography, printmaking, and painting began to reflect modern perspectives, capturing urban life, landscapes, and historical events in ways that combined Western methods with Japanese aesthetics. Literature explored themes of individual agency, modernization, and social change, reflecting the anxieties and aspirations of a population navigating unprecedented upheaval. Education remained a cornerstone of Meiji reform, ensuring that modernization would not be limited to elite classes. The government established a national education system with compulsory primary schooling, emphasizing literacy, arithmetic, and moral instruction. Secondary and higher education institutions offered specialized training in science, engineering, law, and the arts. Students were encouraged to study abroad, absorbing foreign expertise and bringing it home to further national development. The resulting educated populace became the engine of Japan's industrial, military, and bureaucratic advancements. Education was both a tool of empowerment and a mechanism for inculcating loyalty to the emperor and the state, creating a population aligned with national goals. Political reform advanced in parallel with social and economic changes. While the emperor's power was officially restored, the Meiji government implemented new administrative structures to centralize authority and manage the country effectively. The creation of prefectures replaced the old feudal domains, staffed by officials directly appointed by the central government. This centralized bureaucracy allowed for uniform enforcement of laws, efficient tax collection, and consistent implementation of modernization policies. Local resistance existed, but the government's combination of coercion, diplomacy, and strategic compromise ensured that these reforms were largely successful. By consolidating power and streamlining administration, the Meiji state laid the foundation for a strong, cohesive nation capable of competing on the international stage. The military reforms of the Meiji era were especially significant. Recognizing the threats posed by Western powers and the importance of military capability in asserting sovereignty, the government modernized both the army and navy. A conscript system replaced the hereditary samurai military, ensuring that all male citizens could contribute to national defense. Training, organization, and weaponry were modeled on Western systems, particularly those of Britain, France, and Germany. Military academies were established, producing officers skilled in strategy, engineering, and logistics. By integrating technology, training, and professional administration, the Meiji military became a decisive instrument in Japan's assertion of national power. Industrialization and modernization, however, were not uniform in their effects. Rural communities faced both opportunities and challenges. Land taxation reforms incentivized production, but placed financial pressure on farmers. Some prospered by selling surplus crops to urban markets. Others struggled under the burden of debt and changing economic conditions. Social stratification shifted as new wealth emerged from commerce and industry, challenging the established hierarchies of the old feudal system. Former samurai, merchants, artisans, and peasants navigated a complex landscape of social, economic, and political change, each adapting to varying degrees of success. The Meiji government had to continually balance innovation with social stability, ensuring that rapid progress did not produce societal fragmentation. Japan's approach to foreign relations during the Meiji era reflected both pragmatism and ambition. Leaders understood the strategic necessity of engaging with Western powers to avoid colonization or domination. Diplomatic initiatives sought to renegotiate unequal treaties, establish consular relations, and participate in global trade networks. Simultaneously, Japan observed the colonial practices of Western powers, learning military, administrative, and technological strategies. This selective adoption of foreign methods allowed Japan to modernize on its own terms, while preserving sovereignty and cultural identity. By the end of the century, Japan had transformed from an isolated nation into a respected and assertive player on the international stage. The legal and institutional reforms of the Meiji era were equally transformative. Feudal laws were replaced with a centralized legal code influenced by Western models, but adapted to Japanese society. Property rights, commercial regulations, and civil codes provided stability, encouraged economic development, and facilitated both domestic and international commerce. Legal reform reinforced the authority of the central government and underpinned the nation's modernization efforts. By establishing predictable legal frameworks, Japan positioned itself as a reliable partner in international trade and diplomacy, signaling its readiness to compete in a globalized world. Cultural adaptation during the Meiji era also reflected careful negotiation between innovation and tradition. While Western-style clothing, architecture, and social customs became common in urban centers, traditional art, literature, and religious practices were preserved and even promoted. The government emphasized Shinto as a unifying cultural and spiritual foundation, linking reverence for the emperor with loyalty to the state. Buddhist institutions adapted to the new social order, continuing to play roles in education, social welfare, and community life. This blending of old and new created a society capable of modern achievement without severing ties to its historical and cultural roots. The Meiji Restoration also had profound implications for gender and social norms. While modernization primarily emphasized male education, employment, and military service, the role of women began to evolve as well. Education for girls became more widely available, particularly in urban areas, and women gradually entered the workforce in factories, schools, and hospitals. These changes were incremental, and traditional expectations persisted, but they planted seeds for greater female participation in public and professional life in the decades to follow. The Meiji era thus marked the beginning of a slow but significant transformation in gender roles and social expectations. Japan's economic modernization during the Meiji era was a remarkable feat of strategic planning. State-sponsored initiatives established model industries, encouraged private enterprise, and invested in infrastructure to stimulate growth. Railways, ports, and telegraph systems enabled commerce and communication on an unprecedented scale. The industrialization of textiles, steel, and shipyards laid the groundwork for Japan's emergence as a competitive economic power. Urban centers became incubators of commerce and innovation, while rural areas were gradually integrated into a national economic system. This holistic approach to economic development ensured that modernization extended beyond isolated projects to encompass the entire nation. The intellectual climate of the Meiji era was vibrant and dynamic. Japanese scholars and thinkers engaged deeply with Western political, scientific, and philosophical thought. Constitutional ideas, concepts of civic rights, and notions of rational governance were studied and debated. At the same time, intellectuals wrestled with questions of identity, morality, and cultural preservation. Newspapers. The Meiji era's success in transforming Japan was not achieved in isolation. It was part of a global context of rapid technological advancement, imperial expansion, and shifting power dynamics. Japan observed Western powers closely, learning from their successes and failures. Western-style banking, industrial techniques, and military strategies were studied, adapted, and implemented. The selective adoption of foreign ideas was deliberate, ensuring that Japan retained cultural and political autonomy while acquiring the tools necessary for survival and growth. This strategy of controlled assimilation distinguished Japan from other nations that had been entirely colonized or absorbed by imperial powers. Urban life underwent a profound transformation during this period. The influx of people from rural regions drawn by industrial employment led to the expansion of cities. Tokyo, formerly Edo, became a hub of commerce, government, and culture. Streets teemed with shops selling imported goods alongside traditional markets. Cafes, theaters, and public halls became centers of social life and intellectual exchange. Modern conveniences such as gas lighting, public water systems, and trams reshaped the cityscape and daily routines. These changes not only reflected technological progress, but also symbolized a society reorienting itself toward efficiency, modernity, and participation in a wider world. Industrial growth created new social dynamics and classes. The rise of entrepreneurs, factory owners, and a wage-earning urban workforce disrupted the old feudal hierarchies. Merchants and industrialists gained influence through capital and innovation, challenging the traditional dominance of the samurai and landholding elite. Workers faced new challenges: regimented schedules, mechanized labor, and emerging labor rights issues. The government had to manage this transformation carefully, implementing labor regulations and encouraging education to mitigate unrest while promoting productivity. In this way, modernization became both an opportunity and a social experiment in governance and societal cohesion. Transportation infrastructure further accelerated Japan's modernization. Railways connected distant regions, enabling commerce, mobility, and cultural exchange. Trade routes were no longer constrained by geographical distance or feudal borders, allowing for the distribution of goods, information, and ideas at unprecedented speed. Steamships and modern ports facilitated international trade, establishing Japan as an active participant in global commerce. The movement of people from rural farmers to urban professionals created a dynamic, mobile population capable of responding to economic and social demands with flexibility and innovation. Military modernization was central to Japan's assertion of sovereignty. The conscription system ensured a disciplined, trained citizen army. Western military organization, tactics, and weaponry were adopted, creating forces capable of defending the nation and projecting power regionally. Naval modernization, inspired by Britain, produced a fleet able to navigate international waters with skill and confidence. Japan's military achievements in later conflicts, including victories over China and Russia, demonstrated the effectiveness of these reforms, establishing Japan as a credible military power in Asia. These successes validated the strategic vision of the Meiji leadership and reinforced national pride. Education remained a vital pillar of societal transformation. Compulsory primary education fostered literacy, civic responsibility, and foundational skills for all citizens. Secondary and higher education institutions specialized in fields critical for modernization, from engineering and medicine to law and administration. The introduction of Western knowledge, combined with traditional Japanese values, produced a population capable of navigating complex technological, economic, and political challenges. Education also served to instill loyalty to the emperor and nation, reinforcing the cohesion necessary for a rapidly modernizing society. Cultural adaptation continued to define the era. Western clothing, architecture, and customs were introduced, particularly in urban centers, yet traditional arts, festivals, and religious practices persisted. Shinto was emphasized as a unifying cultural framework, while Buddhism and other practices adapted to the new social and political landscape. Literature explored themes of individualism, social responsibility, and modernization, reflecting the aspirations and anxieties of a society in flux. The Meiji era demonstrated that modernization need not erase cultural identity, but could coexist with it in a dynamic synthesis. Legal reforms were central to the success of modernization. Feudal codes were replaced with uniform civil and commercial laws, providing predictability and security for both domestic and international economic activity. Property rights, commercial regulations, and codified criminal law strengthened the authority of the state and facilitated economic development. Legal modernization not only stabilized society internally, but also signaled to foreign powers that Japan was capable of functioning as a modern, law-abiding nation on the global stage. These reforms established the framework for governance that would endure well into the 20th century. Industrial and technological development was closely coordinated with state policy. The government sponsored model factories and infrastructure projects while encouraging private enterprise. Innovations in textiles, steel production, shipbuilding, and other sectors created a diversified industrial base. Urban labor markets expanded, drawing workers into the new industrial economy. The resulting economic dynamism supported further modernization, creating a cycle of growth, innovation, and social adaptation. Japan's success in industrialization was remarkable, given the speed and breadth of transformation compared with other nations. The Meiji Restoration also reshaped social hierarchy. The old samurai class was gradually phased out, losing exclusive privileges and stipends. Some adapted to new roles in business, education, or government. Others resisted, as seen in uprisings like the Satsuma Rebellion. Peasants, artisans, and merchants gained opportunities for upward mobility in the industrial economy. Social change was both deliberate, guided by government policy, and emergent, driven by economic forces and individual agency. By redefining social roles, the Meiji era created a more fluid society in which merit, skill, and innovation played an increasingly important role. Japan's approach to international engagement combined pragmatism with ambition. Leaders recognized the dangers of colonization and the opportunities of selective modernization. Diplomatic initiatives sought to revise unequal treaties, establish alliances, and participate in international trade. At the same time, military modernization and industrial capability allowed Japan to assert sovereignty and regional influence. The strategic blending of diplomacy, military strength, and technological adoption enabled Japan to navigate a turbulent global environment successfully. The cultural impact of the Meiji Restoration is evident in the arts, literature, and public life. Traditional forms such as kabuki, no, and ukiyo-e continued, often integrated with Western techniques or themes. New literature explored contemporary social issues, individualism, and national identity. Photography captured urban landscapes, industrial achievements, and social transformations, creating visual documentation of the nation's evolution. Music, theater, and public celebrations reflected the interplay between traditional aesthetics and modern influences. Cultural adaptation allowed Japan to modernize while maintaining a coherent national identity, bridging past and future. Urbanization transformed daily life. Crowded streets, modern markets, and public transportation changed the rhythm of cities. Citizens navigated new social, economic, and technological realities. Urban labor markets offered opportunities and challenges, while educational institutions prepared the population for participation in a modern economy. Infrastructure improvements from sanitation to transportation enhanced quality of life and public health. The physical and social transformation of cities symbolized the broader societal shift taking place across Japan. Industrial and technological advances reshaped Japan's economy. Factories, mills, and shipyards produced goods for domestic consumption and international trade. Entrepreneurship flourished, creating new classes of wealth and influence. Government support for strategic industries facilitated rapid growth and ensured alignment with national priorities. Infrastructure projects connected production centers to markets and ports, increased efficiency, and promoted integration. The resulting economic transformation underpinned Japan's emergence as a regional power and provided the resources necessary for continued modernization. Education was central to the nation's transformation. Primary education expanded literacy and numeracy, while secondary and higher education developed specialized knowledge in fields such as engineering, medicine, and administration. Students trained abroad brought back expertise, contributing to technological adoption and innovation. Education also instilled values of citizenship, loyalty to the emperor, and civic responsibility. The development of an educated population ensured that Japan could sustain modernization, manage complex institutions, and compete internationally. The Meiji Restoration's military reforms ensured that Japan could defend itself and project power. Conscription replaced hereditary military obligations, creating a citizen army capable of modern tactics and organization. Western military doctrine and technology were adopted to increase effectiveness. A modern navy complemented the army, enabling Japan to protect trade routes, assert sovereignty, and engage in regional conflicts. Military modernization provided security, reinforced national pride, and supported Japan's international ambitions, demonstrating the Meiji Restoration's legacy is perhaps most profoundly seen in Japan's enduring capacity for adaptation and innovation. The nation's rapid transformation demonstrated that deliberate, strategic modernization could preserve sovereignty, strengthen the state, and simultaneously honor cultural heritage. By embracing both Western technology and indigenous identity, Japan created a society capable of thriving in an era of global change. This balance of tradition and innovation remains a defining feature of Japanese society, reflecting lessons learned during the Meiji era about flexibility, resilience, and vision. Industrialization and urbanization reshaped social norms and daily life. Citizens adapted to new forms of labor, commerce, and public life. The growth of cities facilitated cultural exchange, education, and political engagement. Public spaces such as libraries, theaters, and cafes became centers of discourse, fostering a more informed and connected population. At the same time, challenges emerged. Social inequalities, labor exploitation, and urban crowding required careful management. The Meiji leadership responded through regulation, education, and civic initiatives, balancing economic progress with social cohesion. In doing so, they cultivated a society that could participate fully in the modern world. Education's transformative impact extended beyond literacy and vocational training. Schools nurtured critical thinking, civic responsibility, and an understanding of national purpose. Higher education and specialized training produced engineers, physicians, bureaucrats, and military officers who became pillars of the modern state. The export of Japanese students to study abroad further enhanced national capacity, bringing new knowledge and global perspectives back home. The emphasis on learning and intellectual growth created human capital capable of sustaining industrial, military, and cultural advancements well into the 20th century. Cultural adaptation continued to be a hallmark of the Meiji era. While Western fashion, architecture, and social customs became prominent in urban centers, traditional arts, festivals, and religious practices were actively preserved. Shinto served as a unifying spiritual framework connecting citizens to the emperor and national identity. Buddhism and other indigenous practices adapted to the changing social landscape, retaining influence in education, social welfare, and cultural life. Literature and visual arts reflected the synthesis of East and West, tradition and modernity, expressing both societal anxieties and aspirations. Through culture, Japan navigated modernization without losing its historical continuity. The Meiji era also redefined governance and statecraft. Centralization of authority enabled uniform implementation of policies, efficient taxation, and consistent legal enforcement. Prefectures replaced feudal domains, staffed by officials directly accountable to the central government. Legal reforms codified civil, criminal, and commercial law, providing stability for citizens and international partners alike. Bureaucratic modernization ensured that Japan could manage rapid social, economic, and technological change while asserting its place on the global stage. This institutional strength became the backbone of Japan's sustained modernization and future resilience. Military modernization was crucial to national survival and international credibility. A conscript army replaced the hereditary samurai system, integrating citizens into national defense. Western tactics, organization, and weaponry enhanced effectiveness, while military academies trained skilled officers. Naval modernization ensured protection of trade routes and territorial sovereignty. Later successes in regional conflicts, including the First Sino-Japanese War and Russo-Japanese War, demonstrated the effectiveness of Meiji reforms and solidified Japan's status as a rising power. Military strength, coordinated with industrial and technological modernization, was central to Japan's strategic vision. Economic transformation under the Meiji government was comprehensive. State-sponsored industries, infrastructure projects, and support for private enterprise created a diversified industrial base. Railways, ports, and telegraph networks facilitated commerce and communication. Urban labor markets expanded, creating opportunities for social mobility and innovation. Rural areas adapted to national economic systems, with agricultural modernization supporting industrial growth. The Meiji economy laid the foundation for Japan's emergence as a global competitor, demonstrating the interplay between policy, industry, and human capital in achieving rapid national development. Urbanization brought social change and new cultural dynamics. Cities became centers of commerce, culture, and innovation, attracting populations from across the country. Public transportation, markets, and social institutions transformed daily life. Urban citizens encountered new opportunities and challenges, from factory work to educational access. Public spaces such as theaters, schools, and libraries facilitated civic engagement and cultural expression. Urban life became a microcosm of Meiji Japan, reflecting the complex interplay of modernization, tradition, and social adaptation. The Meiji era also produced lasting shifts in social hierarchy and mobility. The abolition of the samurai class and the redistribution of privileges created a more fluid society. New opportunities emerged for merchants, industrialists, and educated citizens. Labor, education, and entrepreneurship allowed individuals to navigate a rapidly modernizing landscape. While inequalities persisted, the pathways for social mobility were expanded, reflecting a fundamental reordering of societal structures. This reconfiguration of social roles supported the broader goals of modernization, national cohesion, and economic growth. Cultural and intellectual life flourished alongside political and economic transformation. Western ideas were studied, adapted, and debated, influencing political thought, scientific research, and social philosophy. Literature, theater, visual arts, and music engaged with both traditional and modern themes. Intellectual discourse explored individual rights, civic responsibility, and national identity. This vibrant cultural environment fostered creativity, critical thinking, and civic awareness, preparing Japanese society for the complexities of the modern world. Education, industry, military, and governance reforms were interdependent, creating a cohesive modernization strategy. By aligning social, economic, and technological change with national objectives, Japan achieved rapid and sustainable development. The emphasis on human capital, infrastructure, and institutional coherence ensured that modernization extended beyond superficial imitation of the West to deep structural and societal transformation. This integrated approach was key to Japan's resilience and success in navigating the pressures of an increasingly interconnected and competitive global environment. The Meiji Restoration's influence extended beyond Japan's borders. Observers in Asia and beyond recognized Japan's ability to modernize without succumbing to colonization. The nation's successes provided a model for selective adoption of foreign practices, demonstrating that tradition and innovation could coexist. The transformation reshaped regional dynamics, altering perceptions of power, sovereignty, and national identity. The Restoration period thus had implications not only for domestic development but also for global geopolitics, signaling the emergence of Japan as a formidable regional and international actor. Social, economic, and political reforms under the Meiji regime created a foundation for Japan's 20th century trajectory. Industrial growth, educational advancement, and military modernization enabled Japan to assert influence internationally. Urbanization and social mobility fostered a dynamic society capable of sustaining innovation and adaptation. Cultural and intellectual development reinforced national identity while promoting critical engagement with global ideas. The Meiji Restoration, therefore, was not a temporary political change, but a comprehensive societal transformation with enduring consequences. Reflecting on the Meiji era, it is evident that Japan's success depended on vision, strategic planning, and adaptability. The leaders of the Meiji Restoration navigated a complex landscape of internal pressures and external threats. They balanced modernization with cultural preservation, centralization with social cohesion, and technological adoption with national identity. Their achievements demonstrate the capacity of leadership and society to enact rapid, systemic change while retaining continuity and purpose. The Meiji Restoration thus serves as a profound example of the possibilities inherent in deliberate, thoughtful societal transformation. The era's legacy continues to shape modern Japan. Industrial infrastructure, educational institutions, legal frameworks, and military organization established during the Meiji period remain influential. Cultural and intellectual syntheses initiated during this time inform contemporary Japanese society, blending innovation with tradition. Urban centers, transport networks, and industrial hubs owe their origins to Meiji planning and development. In every aspect, from governance to daily life, the imprint of the Meiji Restoration endures, a testament to the transformative power of strategic modernization. The Meiji Restoration stands as a historical narrative of ambition, resilience, and adaptation. Japan's journey from isolation and feudalism to centralized, industrialized, and internationally recognized power illustrates how deliberate reform, cultural negotiation, and human ingenuity can redefine a nation's trajectory. The period demonstrates that modernization need not entail the loss of identity, but can be a process of synthesis, innovation, and strategic foresight.